Ciata Thompson, and I'm here with Sean Alexis. Our guest today is Guido Weiss. He's running against Lois Frankel for Congress, and this is the Roundtable. Guido, thank you for joining us. How are you today, sir?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm wonderful. How are you today?
Very good. Thanks for joining us. So, some of our audience may not be familiar with you. Tell us what your campaign's about, who you are, a little background, please.
Absolutely. So, again, thank you. I'm really excited to be here with all of you and all of the viewers, Sean and Melody and Ciata, and I love what you're doing and putting on these, conversations for the public to get more engaged. So my name is Guido Weiss. I'm from Palm Beach County, 4 generations of family living right here. And I'm also a Navy Reserve officer. A big part of this campaign and kind of where it stemmed from is me working in Congress the past 4 years for different types of Democrats. All Democrats, totally different sides of the spectrum of what the Democratic Party is at the moment. And I started looking at our South Florida delegation, and particularly the representative who was representing my entire family. And I saw a lot of what I didn't like and a lot of things I was naive to until I was working kind of, I call it in the trenches, but working this, doing all the work, because in Congress, the majority of that work that, is done of anything that gets passed forward, 99% of it is staff work and 1% of it is the members of Congress themselves. And I was sitting there watching, my hometown district be represented by somebody who was really, for lack of a better word, sponsored by the companies that are polluting our environment in South Florida, sponsored by the companies raising our healthcare costs, sponsored by the companies that are keeping systematic injustices like payday lenders, Wall Street, certain companies that are keeping rates up on financial issues. And at the same time, kind of trying to play both sides, like, saying I voted for a Democratic proposal, but I'm not willing to speak out on this, that, or the other issue. Another, and things from social justice to healthcare to gun safety reform, everything comes back down to who's paying for what in politics. And that was the number one lesson I took away from working in Congress for years. And what I wanted to do is give my family and give the people of South Florida another way, another option. And I found I'm home and I see 4 other people doing this in the districts from Palm Beach County to Miami, from Jen Perlman to Christine Olivo to Sheila, McCormack, and myself, all saying, no, the status quo for politicians like Wasserman Schultz and Lois Frankel that are, in many ways reinforcing a lot of systematic societal injustices is not good enough. But I'll pass it back to you because there's a lot more I can just keep going and going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Weiss?
Please, anything.
Oh yeah. Well, you speak of Jen Perlman. We actually, me and Ciata just finished interviewing her not too long ago. Our latest episode is uploading today, so go ahead and check that out, people. If you see that, let us know what you think in the comments below. As far as the policies go, and what interests specifically the Black community, what's your view on police brutality?
So yeah, let's definitely get into that. One thing I got to mention, because we brought up, the Black community, my congressional district was rated, the one that I'm running for, the 8th worst in the entire country for the socioeconomic disparities between the white and Black community. 8th worst in the country. Now, the only other one in Florida that I saw mentioned was Christine Olivo, Frederica Wilson's district, Florida 24. And that was, I think it was 20 something. So that's just one thing from the get-go. That's something that we need to have. It's a whole another big conversation, but our current representative isn't talking about how bad the situation is. Police brutality, it is a major problem. A lot of my campaign and what we're talking about, we're the only candidate out there at Black Lives Matter protests. We're the only candidate out there that is trying to bring in people from the Black community in South Florida into our campaign and really make people a part of our team and have a community-based representation so people can be heard. Now, right now, if you see that there's a sheriff race going on. There's one sheriff who's been there for a long time in Palm Beach County, and another one who is a Black man trying to put forth progressive policies that relate to police brutality. From the perspective that I'm trying to bring from a congressional perspective is one, a community representative who's going to be there with people saying this is unacceptable instead of just kind of pandering both sides. But two, we need to end corporate and systems that reinforce police brutality, like private prisons donating to certain candidates that enforce the war on drugs or enforce certain types of sentencing or policing. I am a Navy sailor, and I did military security work for basically military police. And I was taught the opposite of what they did to George Floyd. I was taught, that was one of the first lessons we discussed when it came to time to practicing what is detaining a human being, was not to do that. There are so many things we know. There are answers out there in terms of what is wrong in policing. And if you want, I can get into some of the ideas that I want to bring forth, but I want to give you an opportunity.
2 or 3 of them that, like, what we can do to reform policing, because that's something. Can you hear us?
Yes, absolutely.
2 or 3 items that would support in the reform of the police departments around the country.
Absolutely. So one, the Congress did pass a set of reforms, the George Floyd related measures, the bill that came through, put forth by Democrats. That to me was just a Band-Aid. That wasn't in any way what we actually need.
But they didn't actually get cross the line, because the Republicans kind of shot it down as it got there. That brings up an interesting question that I have for you. On the state level, especially in Florida, which is majority Republican at this point, it's going to be very hard for any legislator to get a law across the finish line. I mean, the process is very tedious. I mean, there's about 3 readings in the House that has to go down and approved before that law is passed. So how are you going to get like bilateral support with Republicans to do things such as remove or amend qualified immunity or anything of that nature?
So what I think is the best way to move forward with really having these types of systemic changes is, and I know this, is getting out corporate representatives who aren't willing to put forward bold proposals. And on both sides of the aisle, when you talk about something like the 1994 crime bill that expanded death sentences, that expanded the war on drugs, that expanded private prisons, and that you see a significant increase in certain types of nonviolent arrests, that is a Democratic bill. It's not even a Republican bill. That was signed by Bill Clinton, and Joe Biden actually was a part of that bill when he was in the Senate. We need to get rid of these corporate representatives who are tied to the companies that benefit from this current system. I think that that's the best way to move forward to have systemic change, whether it's ending the war on drugs, whether it's, and here's one thing, for them, it's just a numbers game. You have the president whose inauguration was given hundreds of thousands of dollars by companies. Oh, by the way, the person I'm running against personally invested in Core Civic, a private prison company detaining people and detaining refugees at the border. And I think that's unacceptable. But those companies donated to President Trump's campaign and many others. Now, for them, it's just an investment. If we donate $500,000 or $2 million to get this person in office, and they can enact a policy that could make us $40 million, that $500,000 is pennies. So
Mr. Guido, you said the 1995 Violent Crime Control Act. If I understand correctly, that act basically gives government grants and incentives to police departments and stuff to create certain programs, but they're not using the money effectively, is pretty much what happens there. They're not using it for rehab programs. And there's, excessive sentencing on certain laws like crack possession, which primarily affects Black people. What would you change from that law on the state level? Because, I mean, realistically, it would be more effective for a legislator to try to pursue state level changes versus, changes across Congress and stuff right now because of the deadlock that you guys got going on. What would you change on the state level, or how would you change that law?
So in the 1994 crime bill, in terms of what I would definitely change is banning private prisons from benefiting from any government grants related to law enforcement. because every time those private prisons get a federal grant, that gives their arsenal more political capital. Say they got 15 million from from the state of Alabama that actually came from the federal government in its origins, and that's taxpayer money. They can use that 15 million how they want. They're a for-profit prison, and they can take 500,000 of that 15 million and sponsor their mayor candidate, their state candidates, their governor, you name it. So that's number one. We got that bill significantly expanded the proliferation of the private prison industry. Now, public detention centers are incentivized to release people faster because it's a public, tax burden when people are incarcerated. Private prisons want to do everything they can to keep people in there longer and increase sentencing. So that's, I think, the biggest thing that I would do. Two, I'm against the death penalty. The 1994 crime bill increased certain types of situations in which the death penalty was applicable. So I think that that's another one that I would want to reform right away.
Well, given the choices of the top of the ticket for the Democratic Party, you win your election, how would you maneuver around it? Because Biden has been very clear he sees nothing wrong with the crime bill. And of course, Kamala Harris threw poor people in jail because her kids skipped school. So, but not Mnuchin. Strange how that worked out. But how would you maneuver around that?
I think that the best way to maneuver around that is honesty. I think that we shouldn't. And look, I'm running a political race and a Democratic ticket right now, and people could get mad at me for saying this, but I'm not going to shy away from saying, Kamala Harris arrested people for smoking marijuana and then talked about smoking marijuana. That's just not a wonderful thing to do. I mean, that's something that we shouldn't be accepted. Now, I might differ from some of my progressive colleagues here in South Florida, in my opinion. In my view, I think I want to protect our court system in a major way. And so there are plenty of people that are there's kind of a divide within progressive candidates on how we should approach the Biden-Kamala ticket. In my view, I'm picking that ticket over protest vote, which some are doing. And a main reason is because I cannot see, the loss of the Supreme Court and the entire justice system for another 4 years. We could get there, and that's going to impact my children when they're of age. So I want to support that because I don't want to lose the court system particularly. But in terms of the ticket, we have to be honest. We cannot just all of a sudden, I don't like this idea of as soon as okay, now here we go, no more criticism, let's go. Everybody wrap up what you were saying, forget about Bernie Sanders, forget about Elizabeth Warren, let's go. That to me is unacceptable. And that's what the local Democratic parties here in South Florida try to enact. I mean, they basically are livid with everybody who's running against an incumbent, trying to offer not even just progressive, but a different approach to how we conduct ourselves as community representatives. Like, here's one example. My opponent, this is a bit of a tangent, keeps our constituent services office outside of the district in a building connected to a donor rather than in our district helping our community. That to me is unacceptable, but the local Democratic Party doesn't want to hear that. They want to say, just everybody get behind and let's go forward.
Gotcha. So you win your election. What's the first thing you're working on?
Whew. Okay, so there's the items that we all are aware of. We're all aware of. The Green New Deal, Medicare for all, and campaign finance reform are three huge items. And in my view, everything comes down to those three. I mean, people are familiar with them, and they affect everybody in our district in a serious way. That being said, I think that in addition to issues like Justice for Corey Jones Act, we're all going to be progressed as we continue to get incumbent members of Congress. Every single time we put forth a candidate like myself or Jen Perlman or Sheila, we get one step closer to having healthcare for all Americans, because we get one step closer to representatives that are leading by example, not taking big sugar money, not taking pharma money, not taking weapons. a lot of these people that we're going against are also totally financed by the military industrial complex. So we have one step forward in representatives who can say, oh, you know what, we probably shouldn't spend more than 50% of our budget on wars overseas that have made, cost thousands of lives, of American lives, millions of lives of other lives, and put us $6 trillion in debt, even more debt. So that's
Mr.
number
West, you brought up an interesting subject. You said, you talked about like voters voting on more on local politics, the local politicians, representatives in the House and the Senate. And that means that they have to be educated on the importance of local elections. How come the Democrats don't focus more on educating voters on the importance of local elections? Or like, it seems more like they're always looking at the federal election when it comes to like the presidency, but when it comes to local elections, the Republicans seem to dominate that, and they understand more like, hey, look, this, if we win this, it doesn't matter too much if they get the president in.
I mean, this is one of the biggest. This has been a wild thing to see as a candidate. Is the Democratic Party does not focus whatsoever on these primary elections. You've got all the school board, you've got the state house, you've got the sheriff, you've got myself. They don't want to focus on that at all because that is change to the status quo. Primaries are change to the status quo. And a lot of this comes up, we saw for years, Democrats and progressives really had a hard time at the local level because they didn't get support from the party. The party just wanted to talk about national issues, and the Republicans, as you mentioned, dominated. I think that this is a grassroots issue. It's not coming from the party. And here's an example. Every time myself or one of these other progressive candidates is on a forum and we bring up a real issue of criticism that's impacting lives in our districts, all of our opponents that are kind of at the top of the Democratic Party will say, but Trump and McConnell, that's all they want to talk about over and over and over again. They just want to divert to Trump and McConnell instead of talk about, no, we're doing things wrong. And a lot of what we have done wrong has led to some of the craziness we see in society right now in terms of this presidency.
Yeah, so the reason I say that is because what happens is like little simple things get looked over because Democrats are so focused on the big battle at the top. Like in the state of Florida, same-sex sexual relationships for gay men, like the sodomy law, is still there, even though it's unenforceable because in 2003 in Texas, versus what, I don't remember the exact one off the top of my head, the Supreme Court ruled against it, saying that it's unconstitutional to send gay men to jail for that. So like just even the fact that law still exists in Florida and hasn't been repealed from the legislature is ridiculous because the gay men are getting put in jail and harassed as late as 2018 from the Broward County Sheriff's Office, and those little things could be handled, and should be handled. And the Democrats are focused on the big picture and not the little things that are happening. And they should, I think they should.
I agree. And here's another thing with Florida that I find problematic. We are a state that's larger than most countries in the world in terms of our population, or many countries, and our legislature works part-time. And I think, we need to have a legislature that is representative of how significant our state is, how big that population is. So they can't just use these excuses of, oh, we only had 17 weeks or whatever to work on this issue or a couple sessions. You get back to me next year on it. I think that's really problematic. I don't like that we have a state, honestly, with a governing structure and system and revenue and disbursements that's as large as many or more countries in the world, and we're part-time representatives in our Florida State House. And I just think that we can make that a better situation, particularly on issues that you're bringing up. Yeah, all of these issues are incredibly important, and you're totally right. They get overskipped. And again, just as in my race, people talk about, but Trump, and all they want to focus on is President Trump. In Florida, I see this at the local level. Let's talk about DeSantis and only DeSantis, and just divert to that every time there's a real issue that we want to bring up that we can make change on.
Absolutely. Ciara?
Yeah, I love what you're saying here. As far as my big thing I've noticed is the struggle for the people with food, housing. What are some of the things that you personally suggest that can be done? What actions can our leaders take right now to help the people?
Oh yeah. So I think for people's lives, for the benefit of people's lives, instantly, I think that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour minimum. And in our district, there was a big study put out by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology that talked about what is a living wage in South Florida, what's a poverty wage, and what's a living wage. And in Palm Beach County, our state minimum wage is like $8.25 or $8.35, and the federal one is $1 less than that. Palm Beach County, if you have a child, you are in poverty if you make the minimum wage. If you have 2 children, you're in real poverty. Even the $15 minimum wage that I'm talking about doesn't even get you there if you have a child. And I think that's the minimum we should be moving to. But right now we're about half that, and just wages have just not kept up with inflation and other issues relating to increase of cost. The other one is Medicare for all. I was fortunate enough to live overseas and live in countries where universal health care is a reality, and I didn't ever feel like I had to go to the, think like, oh my God, this is going to cost me $1,000. No, drugs in other countries, medical drugs can cost $6, $12. I remember getting a prescription when I was living in Russia for 12. I'm not saying Russia is the model, but Russia for like $12 for something that would have cost $80 in the United States. And that's really unfortunate. And a lot of those are, in my view, 2 things that we can do instantly to help people have better wages and also uplift a lot of people out of that healthcare related poverty that we're seeing over and over again. In terms of housing, there's a lot of federal programs that this administration in particular have wanted to put on the chopping block. And I think that, obviously I'm going to be fighting for robust federal housing programming, not let that be on the chopping block. In terms of environment, pushing forth on something like a Green New Deal. And, people say it over and over again, but it's true. We just need to make it a reality. It will create a lot of jobs, especially down here in South Florida. And again, it's one of those things where we've seen the model for high paying jobs in other areas, and we have small sample sizes of what this type of model can be for society, but we just haven't carried it out.
Thank you.
Mr. Guido, so as far as there's an old saying, it basically says that you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach a man to fish, you feed him for life. With that being said, one of the issues that hurts the Black community is education, and that starts with primary education, like grades pre-K through 5th. And if you don't have a strong foundation there, when you get to high school and middle school, you struggle, you drop out. And that's the story of a lot of Black communities and a lot of Black families. Do you have a plan is that on your radar, addressing education for disadvantaged youths?
Definitely. I mean, one, we need a federal assistance and that will help us get past this gap of, you've got those schools, whether it's pre-K, well, not kindergarten through, but I want to expand it beyond kindergarten, because we've seen data over and over again showing that if you don't provide parents an option to get it helps everybody. If you have programming for children at the preschool level, it helps the parents in their careers, it helps the children's development, and society as a whole becomes more productive. I want to go to the top of education, then come back down.
I meant like from pre-K all the way to 5th grade. So that level, because you get the foundations for math and reading, and that kind of leads you into all the rest of your educational journey.
Yep. So I believe that we should have education covered from pre-K up through 5th grade. I mean, right now we don't have it before kindergarten as public in many areas, and I want to make that a reality in our society. I want to increase Title IX, Title I, Department of Education funding for especially programs that help out communities that don't have the revenue to have public education services, smaller classroom sizes, no computers, packed classrooms, don't even have the books they need. And one of these questions, just as it comes up, so just to be very clear, I'm very supportive of robust funding for public education, particularly from preschool through 5th grade, but even beyond, in terms of student debt relief and higher education and technical training as well. And again, that's another thing that we see the models out there working really well, and we're doing it really bad. And it's just one of the things that's affecting our society in a major way. And it's a significant de-equalizer. We've got the average Black family wealth being $17,000, and the average white family wealth being $171,000. And how is somebody whose entire family wealth of $17,000 supposed to compete or even have, try to get into without a scholarship and pay for a university that costs $20,000 a year to go to for a law degree or whatever, without taking huge loans and then being in debt for another 20 years? We don't need that. That doesn't need to be the case.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So we're coming to the end of our time here. Just give you 30 seconds. What do you want to tell the people?
So I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here. I really, really appreciate these questions. All of them, I think, are at the forefront of everybody's mind, and we need to make it at the forefront of the public discussion. The thing that I want to bring back to people is we need to, one by one, get progressive candidates in Congress who are not going to be basically controlled by special and corporate interests. I think from everything, if you're concerned about education, if you're concerned about healthcare, if you're concerned about the environment or gun safety reform, this is the #1 way to do it, is get people in Congress who are not taking money from corporations and are only beholden to their constituency. The other thing I would want to really get out to people is please go vote in the primary, whether it's myself, Christine, Jen, Sheila, or anybody, or as Sean was mentioning, sometimes the state Senate, the commissioners, the sheriff, all of these affect our lives. In the August 18th primary, which we're in early voting right now in South Florida, is such an important and powerful tool to utilize to make change in your community. So please go vote. If you want to look me up, please go to voteguido.com. Text or call the number on the website and I will pick up or text you back. We're a small grassroots campaign, so I'm basically the one, myself and some of our volunteers, that do all the calls and answering. So please be in touch.
Excellent.
I know that wasn't 30 seconds.
No, you're good, Mr. Guido.
Thank you, Guido, and appreciate you sitting down with us today. It was a real pleasure. Again, make sure you go vote, folks. August 18th. Early voting is available now, so get it done. Have a great day.
You as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.